I slammed the front door of my Buckhead mansion and pretended to leave for a sudden work emergency. Sitting in the driver's seat of my car, I pulled out my phone and tapped on the baby monitor app just to check on my 2-year-old daughter. The screen loaded, and the voices that echoed through the quiet garage left my blood running completely cold. What my husband said to the woman standing in our living room shattered my entire reality. Before I share the details of this ultimate betrayal, let me know where you are tuning in from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to sit in silence while planning the perfect revenge against someone who severely underestimated you. The afternoon started like any other typical Friday in our affluent Atlanta neighborhood. I am Maya, 32 years old, and a senior financial attorney managing portfolios that most people cannot even fathom. I built my career from the ground up, navigating the cutthroat corporate world as a Black woman and securing my place among the city elite. My husband Malik always played the role of my biggest cheerleader. We had a sprawling 6-bedroom estate, luxury cars in the driveway, and a life that looked flawless on the surface. That afternoon, I packed my leather briefcase, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, and told Malik I had an emergency meeting downtown. A major client was facing a crisis, and I needed to be in the office to review a stack of urgent contracts. Malik gave me his trademark charming smile, the one that made me fall for him 8 years ago. He wrapped his arms around my waist, kissed my forehead, and told me not to work too hard. He said he would take care of our daughter and make sure dinner was ready when I got back. I smiled, kissed him back, and walked out the heavy mahogany front door. I pulled the door shut behind me, the loud click echoing on the porch. But I did not have an emergency meeting. I had actually finished my work early and wanted to surprise Malik with a quiet weekend getaway I had been planning. I walked into the attached garage, climbed into my SUV, and closed the car door. I sat there in the dim light of the garage, enjoying a moment of silence before I planned to walk back inside and reveal my surprise. Out of habit, I unlocked my phone and opened the baby monitor app. I just wanted to see if our toddler was napping in her room. But I had recently installed a secondary camera in the main living room to keep an eye on her when she played near the fireplace. I switched the view to the living room camera, expecting to see Malik sitting on the sofa watching television. Instead, I saw a woman pacing across my expensive Persian rug. The sharp click of her designer heels on the hardwood floor echoed through my phone speaker. It was Chloe, my sister-in-law. She was married to Malik's older brother, Marcus. Chloe was a wealthy white woman from a prominent family who never missed an opportunity to remind me of her status. Since the day Marcus brought her into our family, she had treated me with a thinly veiled condescension. She constantly threw microaggressions my way, making snide remarks about my natural hair, my demanding career, or how I did not fit the traditional mold of a submissive society wife. She loved playing the gracious savior, pretending to be inclusive, while subtly tearing me down at every family gathering. I sat frozen in my car, staring at the screen. Why was Chloe in my house while her husband was at work? And why was she pouring herself a glass of my expensive bourbon like she owned the place? Then Malik walked into the frame. He did not look like the supportive husband who had just kissed his hardworking wife goodbye. He walked straight up to Chloe, wrapped his arms tightly around her waist, and pulled her in for a kiss that made my stomach violently churn. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. 8 years of marriage, a beautiful daughter, a life we built together, and he was standing in our living room kissing his brother's wife. But the physical betrayal was only the beginning of the nightmare. I turned the volume up on my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I listened to every word they said. Chloe pulled back from the kiss, swirling the bourbon in her glass. She looked around my meticulously decorated living room with a look of pure disdain. She sighed dramatically, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder. "Is she finally gone?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Honestly, Malik, I do not understand how you endure the smell of cocoa butter in her hair for so long. It is so overpowering. And her whole independent boss woman routine is absolutely exhausting. She acts like she is better than everyone else just because she works on Wall Street level deals." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. The blatant disrespect, the racist undertones, the sheer audacity of this woman standing in the house, my money paid for, insulting my culture and my hard work. I waited for Malik to defend me. I waited for the man who promised to protect me to tell her to shut her mouth. Instead, he laughed. A cold, calculating laugh I had never heard before. "It is almost done, baby," Malik replied, taking the glass from her hand and taking a sip. "You just have to be patient for a few more days." When this corporate restructuring contract is signed on Monday, the new holding company will take full control of her primary investment funds. I have the power of attorney paperwork mixed in with the tax documents she needs to sign. She trusts me completely. She will sign it without even reading the fine print. And once she does, she will not have a single penny left to her name. Everything she built will belong to us. My world stopped spinning and simply crashed. The air in the car suddenly felt too thick to breathe. Malik was not just having an affair with his brother's wife. They were conspiring to bankrupt me. They were plotting to steal the wealth I had sacrificed my blood, sweat, and tears to accumulate. All the late nights at the law firm, all the grueling negotiations, all the stress I endured to provide a luxurious life for my family. He was planning to hand it all over to Chloe. Chloe smiled, tracing her finger down Malik's chest. "Marcus is drowning in debt," she complained. "He thinks we can just keep borrowing against his trust fund, but the bank is threatening to foreclose on our estate. I refuse to be the laughingstock of the country club. I need that money, Malik. We need that money to buy the penthouse and finally leave these losers behind." "Do not worry," Malik said smoothly, pulling her close again. "By next week, Maya will be out on the street trying to figure out how she lost her empire. We will have the penthouse, the offshore accounts, and Marcus will be left holding the bag for his own debts. It is the perfect plan." I lowered my phone, the screen going dark. The silence of the garage wrapped around me heavy and suffocating. A lesser woman might have marched back into that house screaming and crying, demanding answers, throwing punches. A lesser woman would have let her emotions dictate her actions, giving them the satisfaction of calling her an angry, unstable, hysterical wife. But I am not a lesser woman. I am a senior financial attorney who navigates multi-million-dollar hostile takeovers for breakfast. Malik thought he was smart. He thought because I loved him, I was blind. He thought my demanding career made me ignorant to his financial maneuvers. What my arrogant husband did not know was that I had anticipated the possibility of financial betrayal years ago. When you grow up fighting for every single thing you have, you learn to build fortresses around your success. 3 years ago, when Malik first started acting overly interested in managing our joint assets, my instincts had kicked in. I quietly moved the core of my wealth, the vast majority of my corporate shares, my real estate holdings, and my primary investment accounts into an ironclad blind trust located in Delaware. The entity Malik thought he was restructuring was nothing more than a decoy account, a financial shell filled with toxic corporate debt that I had specifically isolated. If he tried to take control of it, he would not be inheriting my wealth. He would be legally assuming millions of dollars in corporate liabilities. I sat in the driver's seat, my heart rate slowly returning to a steady, rhythmic beat. The tears dried up before they even had a chance to fall. The man I loved died the second I heard that recording. In his place stood a parasite, a thief who thought he could feast on my success and feed it to a woman who looked down on my very existence. I started the engine of my SUV, the low rumble vibrating through the steering wheel. I put the car in reverse and slowly backed out of the driveway, heading toward the city. Let them have their afternoon in my house. Let them drink my bourbon and plot my downfall. They thought they were playing a game of checkers, moving pieces behind my back. They had no idea they had just stepped onto a chessboard where I controlled every single move. The trap was set, but it was not for me. It was for them. And I was going to make sure they lost absolutely everything. I forced my trembling finger to press the record button on my phone screen. The small red timer began to count upward, capturing every sickening syllable echoing from the living room camera. I sat in the suffocating stillness of my parked car, the premium leather seat suddenly feeling like a cage. My breath came in shallow, jagged gasps as I listened to the man I married dismantle my life with his brother's wife. I needed this evidence. I needed to document exactly who they were when they thought nobody was watching. As their voices filled the quiet space of my garage, a heavy reel of the last 8 years played in my mind. I had given Malik the best years of my life, my unwavering loyalty, and my absolute brilliance. When we first met, Malik was just a charming but struggling junior analyst drowning in debt, and entirely reliant on his family name to get his foot in the door. I was the one who actually understood the market. I was the one who developed the aggressive investment strategies that initially doubled our portfolio. When we decided to launch our own boutique investment firm, I made the conscious decision to step back into the shadows and let him take the title of managing director. I told myself it was for the optics. I convinced myself that the traditional old money business world of Atlanta preferred dealing with a charismatic, well-spoken man. I fed his ego daily. I stayed up until 3 in the morning drafting the contracts, analyzing the risk factors, and securing the deals that he would later take the credit for at expensive networking lunches. I built the entire foundation of the empire he now paraded as his own. I had poured my entire soul into securing our financial future, completely blind to the fact that I was funding my own personal executioner. The audio from the monitor snapped my attention back to the present reality. Chloe's high-pitched whining voice grated against my ears as she continued to pace across my living room. She was complaining about Marcus Malik's older brother and her husband. It turned out that my highly esteemed brother-in-law, the man who always looked down his nose at me at family dinners, was completely bankrupt. Chloe wailed about their mounting liabilities with a mix of anger and desperation. They were millions of dollars in the hole, mortgaged to the absolute limit, just to maintain the grand illusion of their elite social status. The exorbitant private school tuitions for their children, the lavish country club memberships they constantly flaunted, the extravagant European vacations they plastered all over social media. It was all a massive rotting lie funded by aggressive credit lines they could no longer secure. And Malik, my devoted husband, was actively volunteering to be their personal savior. I listened in absolute horror as they meticulously outlined their strategy to use our company infrastructure to drain my assets. Malik was explaining how he planned to leverage the firm's authority to access the capital I had securely locked away. He wanted to quietly funnel massive sums of cash through a series of shell accounts directly into Marcus and Chloe's failing estate. He was literally planning to steal the money I had earned through grueling 80-hour work weeks to pay off the debts of people who despised me. I heard the clinking of ice in a glass as Chloe took another sip of my premium bourbon. She let out a short, mocking laugh that made my blood boil. "It is about time that money goes to people who actually know how to belong in society," Chloe sneered, her voice dripping with sheer venom. "I mean, honestly, Malik, what does a girl who grew up in the slums of South Atlanta know about wealth management anyway? She is just a glorified numbers cruncher. She does not have the pedigree for this kind of money. It is wasted on her." I sat perfectly still, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I waited for my husband to say something. I waited for the man who slept beside me every night. The man who knew exactly how hard my mother worked to get me out of that neighborhood to defend my honor. I waited for him to tell her to leave my house for disrespecting my roots. Instead, the garage was filled with the sound of his deep, amused chuckle. "You are right," Malik agreed smoothly, his voice devoid of any hesitation or guilt. "She is too focused on the spreadsheets to see the bigger picture. She has zero understanding of legacy or class. But you do not have to worry about her anymore. I have everything completely under control." The sheer audacity of his betrayal felt like a physical blow to my chest. He was mocking the very work ethic that paid for the designer suits he wore and the luxury cars he drove. The racist and classist undertones of Chloe's insults were disgusting, but Malik's casual agreement was a knife straight to my heart. He viewed my background as a flaw, a convenient excuse to justify robbing me blind. They both saw me not as a human being, not as a brilliant attorney and a devoted wife, but simply as a temporary bank account they could exploit and discard. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes as a single tear escaped and rolled down my cheek. It was a tear, mourning the death of the life I thought I had. But the mourning period lasted exactly 3 seconds. The sorrow rapidly evaporated entirely, replaced by a cold, calculating rage that sharpened my focus to a razor edge. I was not going to be a victim. I was not going to let a mediocre man and his entitled mistress strip me of my dignity and my wealth. Through the monitor, Chloe's voice dropped to a soft, conspiratorial whisper. "How much longer, Malik? I cannot handle Marcus and his financial panic attacks for much longer. The bank sent another warning letter today. We need that capital infusion immediately. If we lose the estate, my family will never let me live it down. Do not worry, Malik replied, his tone radiating a sickeningly arrogant confidence. Next Monday is the final step. I have a massive stack of quarterly tax documents prepared for her to review. I slipped the transfer of representation rights right into the middle of the pile. You know how she gets when she is busy. She trusts my organizational skills completely. She will sign the transfer authorization without a second glance. Once her signature is on that specific document, I will have unilateral control over the primary trust fund. The money will be wired to your offshore holding account by Tuesday morning. Chloe let out a relieved sigh, the sound of her kissing his cheek amplifying through the phone. You are brilliant, she murmured. But what about tonight? What if she wants to look at the portfolio over the weekend? She is always obsessing over the accounts. Malik laughed again, a dark manipulative sound that made me want to rip the steering wheel off the dashboard. Leave tonight to me, he said confidently. I am going to make a special dinner, pour her favorite wine, and keep her very happy. I will shower her with so much affection she will completely drop her guard. By the time Monday morning rolls around, she will be practically begging to sign whatever I put in front of her to get back to work. The audio feed continued, but I had heard more than enough. I reached out and tapped the red button, stopping the recording and saving the digital file to multiple secure cloud locations. I took a deep, steadying breath, inhaling the scent of the leather interior. I reached up and firmly wiped the single dried tear from my cheek. A cruel smile slowly appeared on my face. I turned off the engine, grabbed my leather briefcase, and stepped out of the SUV. The cool, damp air of the garage did little to chill the absolute fire currently burning through my veins. I paused for a fraction of a second with my hand on the doorknob, taking a deep, calculated breath. I smoothed the front of my tailored skirt, relaxed my jaw, and arranged my features into a mask of mild, flustered panic. I pushed open the heavy door leading directly into the kitchen, ensuring the lock clicked loudly behind me to serve as a deliberate warning shot. I practically jogged into the main living area, rummaging frantically through my bag and muttering under my breath about scattered contracts and impossible deadlines. Malik and Chloe had already physically separated, though the air between them still crackled with an undeniable guilty tension. Chloe was suddenly deeply fascinated by a modern abstract sculpture resting on our marble mantel, while Malik was hastily adjusting the silver cufflinks of his crisp white shirt. Maya baby Malik said, his voice dropping an octave into that smooth, reassuring tone he reserved for soothing, anxious corporate clients, and apparently his clueless wife. I thought you were halfway downtown to the financial district by now. I forced a breathless, exaggerated sigh, dropping my heavy briefcase onto the granite kitchen island with a loud thud. I thought I was too. I realized halfway down the street that I completely forgot the primary restructuring folder on the desk in my home office. It is an absolute disaster. I cannot walk into this meeting empty-handed. I looked up, feigning mild, polite surprise at the sight of my sister-in-law standing by the fireplace. Chloe, I did not realize you were stopping by today. Chloe turned slowly, swirling the last amber drop of my expensive bourbon in her crystal glass. She offered a tight, condescending smile that did not reach her eyes. Just dropping off some fabric swatches for the country club gala committee, she lied effortlessly, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Though seeing you rush back in such a frantic panic reminds me exactly why I chose to be a present, dedicated mother instead of a corporate workaholic. I simply could never bring myself to leave my precious children to be raised by a hired nanny just to chase another dollar. You really do miss the absolute best years of their lives when your head is constantly buried in financial spreadsheets and legal documents. The urge to cross the room and slap the crystal glass right out of her perfectly manicured hand was nearly overpowering. She was standing right in the middle of the luxury home, my spreadsheets paid for drinking the premium liquor my hard-earned dollars bought, actively plotting to steal the wealth I created, and having the sheer audacity to lecture me on maternal dedication. I took a slow, deep breath, burying the blinding fury beneath a thick layer of manufactured apologetic exhaustion. We all make our different choices, Chloe, I replied, keeping my voice remarkably even and polite. Someone has to keep the investment portfolios growing so the extended family can comfortably maintain their elevated lifestyles. Malik stepped quickly between us, playing his role perfectly. He placed a warm, heavy hand on my shoulder, acting as the gentle, stabilizing mediator. Now, Chloe, do not be too hard on her. Maya is carrying a massive load right now for the firm, and she handles it beautifully. We are just incredibly lucky she is so dedicated to our future. He leaned down and kissed my temple, his lips feeling like pure corrosive poison against my skin. Go grab your file, sweetheart. I will see Chloe out so you can get back on the road. I nodded gratefully, playing the part of the tired, appreciative, innocent wife to absolute perfection. I hurried up the curved staircase to my home office, grabbing a random thick folder off the mahogany desk just to complete the visual prop. By the time I walked back down the stairs, the heavy front door was clicking shut. Chloe was finally gone. Malik turned around and leaned casually against the doorframe, giving me that devastating, charming smile that had once made my heart race with genuine affection. Now looking at him only made my stomach violently churn. He walked over, wrapped his strong arms securely around my waist, and pulled me flush against his chest. I hate seeing you so stressed and overworked, he murmured, his breath warm and familiar against my neck. You work entirely too hard for us. Let me make it up to you tonight. I am going to cook your absolute favorite pan-seared sea bass, open that vintage Cabernet we brought back from our Napa Valley trip, and just completely spoil you. You just focus on surviving this afternoon meeting and leave the entire romantic weekend to me. That sounds perfect. I lied smoothly, resting my head against his chest and closing my eyes. I could hear his heart beating, a steady, calm rhythm of a man who firmly believed he had outsmarted everyone, a man who thought he was the most brilliant player in the game. I will be home by 6 o'clock sharp. I love you. I love you more, he whispered back, kissing the top of my head. He released me, giving my arm a reassuring squeeze, and announced he was going to jump in the shower to freshen up before starting the dinner preparations. I stood by the kitchen island and watched him walk upstairs, listening intently until I heard the bathroom door close and the shower water begin hitting the porcelain tile. The exact moment the water started running, my entire demeanor changed. The exhausted, easily manipulated wife completely vanished, immediately replaced by the sharp, calculating senior attorney who destroyed corporate rivals for a living. I did not head for the front door to leave for my fake meeting. Instead, I turned and walked silently down the hallway into Malik's private study. His sleek silver laptop sat open on his immaculate desk, the screen dark and locked. Malik was incredibly arrogant. He truly believed his digital security was impenetrable because he had a basic understanding of encryption. But when you are married to a woman who routinely untangles complex corporate espionage for multinational conglomerates, a basic user password is nothing more than a momentary, laughable inconvenience. I had cracked his numeric access code 3 years ago when I first suspected he was mismanaging our joint checking accounts to cover his excessive personal spending. It was an embarrassingly predictable combination of his fraternity founding year and Chloe's birth date. I typed the digits in rapidly, my fingers flying across the keyboard without making a sound. The screen immediately illuminated, revealing his email inbox and a series of minimized document windows. I bypassed the decoy folders he had set up on his desktop to mimic his daily administrative workload and navigated straight to a hidden directory buried deep within his system files. I clicked open the restricted folder labeled Restructuring Initiative. The digital documents inside confirmed absolutely everything I had just heard on the baby monitor. There were the fraudulent shell company registrations, the offshore account routing numbers based in the Cayman Islands, and the meticulously drafted power of attorney form disguised as a standard quarterly tax acknowledgement. He had planned it perfectly. He was going to slip that specific form into a massive stack of legitimate mind-numbing paperwork on Monday morning, banking on my chronic fatigue and my absolute trust in him to prevent me from reading the fine print. Once my signature was on that line, he would have unilateral legal control over the primary trust fund, holding the vast majority of my liquid assets. But as I scrolled further down the directory, ensuring I had copied every file to my secure external drive, a separate, heavily encrypted subfolder caught my eye. It was simply titled Buckhead Horizon. I ran a quick decryption script I always kept on my flash drive, bypassed the secondary lock, and clicked it open. The breath caught sharply in my throat, freezing in my lungs. This was not just a pathetic plan to funnel cash into Marcus's failing accounts to save his brother's estate from foreclosure. That was just a fraction of the grand, sickening design. Staring back at me from the bright screen were the finalized, legally binding purchase agreements for a $6 million luxury penthouse in the most exclusive high-security high-rise in downtown Atlanta. I scanned the buyer details, my eyes scanning the text rapidly. The buyer listed on the contract was not Malik. It was not a joint corporate entity. The sole owner listed on the deed was Chloe. My mind raced as the puzzle pieces slammed into place. They were not just stealing my money to cover family debts and save face at the country club. They were utilizing my life savings to purchase their very own private sanctuary, a glittering multi-million-dollar palace in the sky, where they could freely flaunt their stolen wealth and live out their twisted, adulterous fantasy without any financial worries. Malik was buying his brother's wife a mansion with my money, planning to leave me completely destitute while they lived in absolute luxury. I stared at the bright screen, the staggering numbers, and the cold legal jargon burning themselves permanently into my memory. He was going to feed me pan-seared sea bass and pour me vintage wine tonight, holding my hand and acting the part of the devoted, loving husband, while the finalized paperwork to buy his mistress a penthouse sat quietly on his hard drive waiting for my stolen signature to fund it. I carefully closed the files, ran a scrubbing program to completely clear the digital footprint of my access, and locked the screen, leaving the silver laptop in the exact position I had found it. The sound of the shower upstairs abruptly stopped. The water was off. I picked up my leather briefcase, ensuring the random prop folder was tucked neatly inside, and walked silently out the front door, pulling it shut with a soft click. As I climbed back into my SUV and finally started the engine, a cold, ruthless, and terrifyingly absolute calm settled over my entire being. The game was no longer just about protecting my financial assets and securing my future. It was about absolute, total, and uncompromising annihilation. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Atlanta was bathed in the warm, golden glow of thousands of crystal chandeliers. The annual Heritage Trust Gala was the absolute crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was an exclusive, highly curated gathering of the most affluent, influential African American families in the entire South. Generations of established wealth, political power, and corporate dominance were packed into one sprawling room, sipping vintage champagne and discussing multi-million-dollar philanthropic pledges. And then there was Chloe. She was gliding through the sea of black excellence like a self-appointed queen wearing a silver sequined gown that cost more than most people earned in a decade. She practically vibrated with a desperate, pathetic need to be the absolute center of attention. Despite simply marrying into my husband's family, she consistently treated these deeply cultural events as her own personal condescending charity projects. She loved playing the gracious, enlightened white savior to a room full of brilliant people who collectively owned half the commercial real estate in the city. I walked into the grand foyer wearing a custom emerald green silk gown that cascaded perfectly to the floor. My hair was flawlessly styled, my makeup immaculate, and my posture radiating the absolute terrifying calm of a woman who held every single winning card in the deck. Malik walked right beside me, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored velvet tuxedo, playing the part of the devoted, supportive partner to absolute perfection. Before we could even hand our gilded invitation tickets to the usher at the main entrance, Chloe intercepted us. She marched over with a gold-plated clipboard in her hand, a frantic, highly exaggerated look of distress plastered across her face. "Maya, darling," Chloe announced loudly, ensuring her voice carried to the surrounding couples waiting in the reception line. "We have had a massive logistical emergency with the seating chart. It is an absolute nightmare." I maintained a pleasant, perfectly neutral expression. "Is that right?" Chloe sighed heavily, tapping her manicured fingernail against the clipboard. "The primary donor tables are completely overbooked. The governor just confirmed his attendance, and we had to severely shift the arrangement to accommodate his security detail. I placed Marcus Malik and myself at the Platinum VIP table directly next to the podium. We are the official hosts for that section, you know. But I had to move your seat, Maya. You are at table 42. I did not need to look at the master seating chart to know exactly where table 42 was located. It was the absolute worst seat in the entire ballroom. It was a small, cramped table shoved into the dark back corner of the room, positioned directly next to the swinging metal doors of the catering kitchen, where the event coordinators, the administrative staff, and the exhausted volunteers sat. It was a deliberate, calculated, and deeply public demotion. I see, I said softly, my voice giving absolutely nothing away. Chloe offered a tight, patronizing smile, reaching out to pat my arm as if comforting a slow child. Do not take it personally, Maya. It is just that you work with transparent computers and boring financial spreadsheets all day. You certainly are not used to networking with these major high net worth donors. It takes a specific type of charm. We need true elegance and delicacy at the front table to secure these massive financial pledges tonight. The VIP table requires a level of sophisticated communication that you just do not have the background for. The sheer blinding audacity of her statement hung in the air. She was standing in front of a senior financial attorney who regularly negotiated international corporate mergers, telling me I lacked the sophistication to speak to the very same venture capitalists I went to battle with on a weekly basis. She was calling me uncultured to my face, entirely confident that her white privilege and her husband family name made her untouchable. I turned my head slightly and looked directly at Malik. I waited for the facade of the loving husband to kick in. I waited for him to step up, defend his wife, and tell his sister-in-law that we were a unified team who sat together, or we did not sit at all. Instead, Malik let out a soft, dismissive chuckle. He placed a heavy, warm hand on my lower back, offering me a look of mild irritation. Do not make a fuss tonight, Maya, Malik said, his voice dropping into a patronizing whisper. Chloe has been incredibly stressed organizing the silent auction and managing the guest list. Just go along with it gently. Be a team player for once. Do not embarrass us by making a scene over a chair. Just take one for the team tonight, baby. I looked at the man who had secretly drafted power of attorney papers to bankrupt me. I looked at the man who had a finalized purchase agreement for a $6 million penthouse for his mistress currently sitting on his encrypted hard drive. He actually thought I was going to throw a tantrum. He thought I was going to cry, argue, or storm out of the hotel, proving Chloe Point that I was an angry, uncultured woman who did not know how to behave in polite society. They both wanted me to react emotionally so they could justify their quiet, shared contempt for me. I smiled. It was a radiant, stunning, and completely hollow smile. Of course, I replied, my voice smooth as silk. I completely understand the logistical pressure, Chloe. You three have a wonderful time at the front. I will find my way to my table. Chloe blinked, momentarily thrown entirely off balance by my immediate, graceful surrender. She had armed herself for a vicious argument and found herself punching dead air. Excellent, she stammered quickly, recovering her smug composure. Enjoy the dinner, Maya. Malik kissed my cheek, completely oblivious to the venom currently coursing through my veins, and offered his arm to Chloe. I watched them walk away together toward the brightly lit center of the ballroom, laughing intimately as they approached the platinum tables. I turned on my heel and walked the opposite direction, navigating through the maze of tables until I reached the dimly lit back corner near the kitchen doors. Table 42 was exactly as humiliating as intended. I sat down next to an exhausted sound technician and a very polite woman managing the coat check. I ordered a sparkling water with a twist of lime and settled into my chair. What Chloe and Malik completely failed to realize was that putting me in the shadows gave me the absolute best tactical vantage point in the entire room. I could see everything. More importantly, Table 42 was positioned directly adjacent to the heavy velvet curtains that separated the main ballroom from the private members, only cigar lounge and scotch bar. It was the quiet, secluded area where the truly powerful men and women retreated to escape the loud music, avoid the obnoxious socialites like Chloe, and conduct actual unregulated business. About an hour into the incredibly tedious speeches, the velvet curtains parted. 3 older, distinguished men stepped out of the private lounge and stood near the edge of my table, seeking a quiet spot away from the deafening applause. I recognized them instantly. It was Richard Sterling, the CEO of a massive commercial real estate conglomerate, accompanied by 2 senior board members of the largest venture capital firm in the state. These were the exact 3 men Malik had been desperately trying to secure as primary investors for our boutique firm for the last 6 months. Malik needed their capital to mask the massive financial hole he and Marcus were actively digging. The men stood with their backs partially turned to me, swirling their expensive scotch, completely ignoring the gala proceeding on the main stage. "I am telling you, Richard," one of the board members groaned, taking a sip of his drink. "The man is an absolute clown. I cannot take another one of his pitch meetings. He is all flash expensive suits and absolutely zero substance." Sterling let out a harsh, barking laugh. "You are talking about Malik, right? It is embarrassing. Did you see those projected risk assessments he sent over to my office on Tuesday? The mathematics were completely flawed. A first-year business student could see the glaring holes in his portfolio strategy. He operates like a man who is desperate for cash, not a man looking to build sustainable wealth." The third man nodded in agreement. "The only reason his firm even survived its first 2 years is because of his wife. Maya is the one with the actual brains. She drafted the original corporate restructuring for my acquisitions team 3 years ago. She is brilliant, terrifyingly precise. If she were the one pitching us the new fund, I would sign the check tonight. But dealing with Malik is like dealing with a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. I am officially declining his proposal on Monday morning. We are not trusting our capital to a man who cannot even explain his own spreadsheets." I sat perfectly still, listening to the absolute destruction of my husband's professional reputation straight from the mouths of the men he worshipped. Malik was failing. He was failing spectacularly, and his desperation to steal my money was directly tied to the fact that the legitimate business world saw right through his charming hollow facade. Chloe thought seating me at the back of the room would silence me. She thought keeping me away from the bright lights would render me completely powerless. She was spectacularly wrong. The back of the room was where the real predators waited. I placed my glass of sparkling water down on the table. I smoothed the fabric of my emerald gown, stood up, and took 2 deliberate steps toward the group of men. I arranged my features into a look of pleasant, confident surprise. It was time to completely sever Malik's final professional lifeline, and I was going to do it with a smile. The satisfaction of that brief, lethal conversation with Richard Sterling still thrummed in my veins as the morning sun filtered through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of our kitchen. The venture capitalists had been more than receptive to my subtle, highly confidential suggestion that my firm was preparing to spin off a new, independently managed asset division. They practically tripped over themselves, handing me their private contact information, leaving Malik completely out of the equation. Now it was Sunday morning. I stood at the marble island, slowly stirring a cup of Earl Grey tea, waiting for my husband to make his appearance. Malik strolled into the kitchen, wearing his expensive cashmere lounge pants, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and projecting the aura of a man completely at peace with the world. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, offering me a lazy, satisfied smile. "We need to talk about last night," I said, keeping my voice carefully modulated to sound hurt rather than furious. "You stood right there in the foyer of the St. Regis and let Chloe publicly humiliate me in front of the most influential families in Atlanta. You actually laughed with her, Malik. You told me to take one for the team." Malik sighed, rolling his eyes as he took a slow sip of his coffee. His entire demeanor immediately shifted into a posture of exhausted patience. "Maya, please do not start this drama so early in the morning. I am exhausted. You are completely overreacting to a minor seating adjustment." "It was not a minor adjustment," I countered, playing the role of the wounded, emotional wife he expected me to be. She shoved me next to the kitchen doors and told me I lacked the sophistication to speak to our own donors. She insulted my background and my career, and my husband agreed with her. Malik set his mug down on the granite with a sharp clink, stepping closer to loom over me. His voice dropped into that dark, manipulative tone he used whenever he wanted to twist reality to suit his narrative. "You are always doing this, Maya. You are always playing the victim." Chloe was stressed out of her mind trying to organize a massive charity gala, and you made it all about your bruised ego. You have this massive inferiority complex because of where you grew up, and you project it onto her. I stared at him, letting my eyes widen in manufactured disbelief. "An inferiority complex? I built the very firm you run. And there it is," Malik snapped, pointing a finger at me. "Always keeping score, always aggressive. You harbor this deep, unjustified prejudice against Chloe simply because she is white and comes from a different social pedigree. You resent her ease, her grace, and the fact that she does not have to act like a corporate bulldog to get what she wants. She bent over backward to try and include you in the host committee, and you just sat in the back of the room pouting like a petulant child. It was embarrassing. The sheer psychological manipulation was breathtaking. If I had not listened to the baby monitor yesterday, if I had not seen the $6 million penthouse deed with Chloe, name on it, his words might have actually planted a seed of doubt in my mind. He was weaponizing my race, my work ethic, and my childhood struggles to paint me as an unstable, aggressive woman bullying his poor, fragile sister-in-law. He was laying the psychological groundwork to justify leaving me. He wanted me to feel so unbalanced and guilty that I would gladly sign those trust fund documents tomorrow morning just to prove my devotion to him. You really think I am jealous of her? I asked, letting my voice waver perfectly. I think you are deeply insecure, Malik replied, his tone softening into a sickeningly fake sympathy. He reached out and stroked my cheek. I love you, Maya, but your aggressive nature makes things incredibly difficult for this family. You made Chloe cry last night after you stormed off. She felt terrible. You need to apologize to her today to keep the peace. Marcus is furious. Before I could even formulate a response to that absolute garbage, the front doorbell chimed. It was not a polite ring, but a sharp, demanding series of buzzes. Malik patted my shoulder and walked to the foyer, opening the heavy oak doors. Marcus and Chloe swept into my home as if they owned the very foundation it sat upon. Marcus, a man currently millions of dollars in debt and facing imminent financial ruin, puffed his chest out in a ridiculous display of unearned alpha male dominance. Chloe trailed slightly behind him, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and clutching a tissue. She had completely bypassed subtle and gone straight for the full theatrical performance of a wounded, fragile victim. Malik Marcus barked, his voice echoing loudly off the vaulted ceilings. I am only here because Chloe insisted we try to clear the air, but I am absolutely not going to tolerate my wife being bullied by yours. Malik held his hands up in a placating gesture. I know, Marcus. I was just talking to Maya about her behavior. Come into the kitchen. They walked in a unified front of absolute toxicity. Chloe removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were miraculously completely dry, despite the tissue clutched in her fist. She looked at me with a tragic, trembling pout, while a victorious, vicious smirk danced at the very corners of her mouth. Maya. Chloe whispered, her voice shaking with manufactured emotion. I just do not understand what I did to make you hate me so much. I have tried so incredibly hard to be a good sister to you. I put you on the platinum host list, and I only moved your seat because the governor's security team explicitly demanded it. And you just glared at me and stormed away. It broke my heart. I barely slept last night. She dabbed at her perfectly dry cheek, leaning into Marcus for support. Marcus wrapped a protective arm around her delicate shoulders, glaring at me with utter contempt. You owe my wife a massive apology, Maya Marcus demanded. She volunteers her time to elevate this family's social standing, and you treat her like dirt because you cannot handle the fact that she knows how to operate in these circles better than you do. You are tearing this family apart with your petty, childish jealousy. I stood perfectly still, my hands resting lightly on the marble island. I looked at Marcus, a man who was actively conspiring with his brother to steal my life savings to pay off his bad debts. I looked at Chloe, a woman who was currently sleeping with my husband and planning to move into a luxury penthouse funded by my sweat and blood. And finally, I looked at Malik. Malik crossed his arms, staring at me with a heavy, disappointed glare. Do the right thing, Maya, he commanded softly. Apologize to Chloe. Fix this. Show me you can actually be a supportive part of this family. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, thick with their collective arrogance. They had me surrounded in my own home, bullying me, gaslighting me, and demanding my submission. They expected me to break. They expected me to argue, to yell, to defend myself, which would only further prove their narrative that I was unhinged. Instead, I reached deep inside myself and pulled out a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I lowered my gaze, letting my shoulders slump ever so slightly. I took a shaky breath, forcing a look of profound, ashamed realization onto my face. You are right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Chloe blinked, her theatrical tears instantly stalling. Malik dropped his arms, looking marginally surprised by how quickly I had folded. I looked up, meeting Chloe's eyes with an expression of total, utter defeat. I am so incredibly sorry, Chloe. I let my own insecurities get the absolute best of me last night. You worked so hard on the gala, and it was beautiful. I felt out of place, and I unfairly took that frustration out on you. It was unprofessional, it was unkind, and it was completely unacceptable. I promise you, it will never ever happen again. The sheer danger lurking beneath my words went completely undetected by the three predators in the room. When I promised it would never happen again, I meant it literally. They would never have the opportunity to humiliate me again because they were about to lose everything. Chloe's face broke into a massive triumphant smile. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a suffocating, perfume-drenched hug. "Oh, Maya," she cooed in my ear. "I forgive you. We are family. I just want us to be close." I patted her back lightly, my expression completely dead, as I stared over her shoulder at the stainless steel refrigerator. "I'm glad we cleared the air," I murmured. Marcus clapped Malik on the shoulder, letting out a loud, obnoxious laugh. "See? That is all it takes, a little humility. We should all hit the club for Sunday brunch to celebrate keeping the family together. My treat." Malik smiled brilliantly, the tension completely leaving his body. He truly believed he had won. He believed I was thoroughly broken, completely manageable, and absolutely ready to sign away my trust fund tomorrow morning. "Sounds perfect, Marcus. Maya, baby, why do not you stay here and rest? You look exhausted. We will be back in a few hours." "That sounds wonderful," I agreed meekly. "I have some emails to catch up on anyway. Enjoy brunch." I stood in the foyer and waved as the three of them walked out the front door, laughing and joking as they climbed into Marcus' luxury sedan. I watched the car disappear down the manicured street. The moment they were out of sight, the submissive broken wife vanished into thin air. I turned around, my spine snapping straight, my jaw setting into a hard, unforgiving line. I walked briskly back to my home office and locked the heavy oak door behind me. I bypassed my standard work computer and pulled a prepaid burner phone from the hidden compartment in the back of my desk drawer. I punched in a highly unlisted number I had memorized late last night. The phone rang twice before a crisp professional voice answered. "Diane Sterling office. How may I direct your call?" "This is Maya. I am calling to confirm my 2 o'clock appointment with Diane today." Diane Sterling was not just a lawyer. She was the absolute apex predator of high-asset divorce and financial litigation in the state of Georgia. She was notoriously ruthless, famously expensive, and coincidentally, the older sister of Richard Sterling, the venture capitalist whose firm I had just secured last night. "Yes, Maya," the assistant replied warmly. "Diane is expecting you at the private downtown office. She has already reviewed the preliminary digital files you sent over via the secure server this morning. She mentioned she is very much looking forward to dismantling them." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Perfect," I replied. "Tell her I am bringing the rest of the documentation. It is time to start the fire." The opportunity to strike the match came exactly 3 days later at our mandatory Thursday evening family dinner. The venue was Aria, a breathtakingly pretentious Michelin-starred restaurant in Buckhead, where securing a reservation required either a minor miracle or a highly recognizable last name. Malik's parents, Arthur and Eleanor, insisted on these weekly gatherings to project the image of a tightly knit, incredibly successful dynasty. Arthur was a retired Superior Court judge with a booming voice, and Eleanor was a classic Southern society matron who had perfected the art of delivering devastating insults wrapped in sweet maternal concern. I arrived exactly on time, taking my seat next to Malik at the long candlelit table. My husband played the part of the doting partner, flawlessly pulling out my chair and kissing my cheek, completely oblivious to the fact that Diane Sterling and her team of forensic accountants were currently tearing his offshore financial infrastructure to absolute shreds. 10 minutes later, Marcus and Chloe made their grand entrance. Every head in the private dining alcove turned. Chloe was wearing a simple, sleek black cocktail dress, but nobody was looking at the fabric. They were entirely focused on her neck. Resting against her collarbone was a magnificent, blinding cascade of brilliant cut diamonds. It was a vintage Cartier piece, heavy, ostentatious, and undeniably breathtaking. Eleanor literally gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Chloe, darling, that is the most spectacular thing I have ever laid eyes on." Chloe touched the stones lightly, feigning a modest blush. Marcus just spoils me absolutely rotten, Eleanor. We were celebrating our anniversary a little early, and he simply insisted I have it. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, my eyes tracking the way the light caught the diamonds. I did not need an appraisal to know the exact value of that necklace. It was exactly $150,000. I knew that specific number because I had spent my morning reviewing the wire transfers Malik had authorized from our joint corporate reserve account last Tuesday, under the guise of an emergency legal retainer fee for a shell corporation. Malik had not just bought his mistress a $6 million penthouse. He was actively financing her jewelry collection, while Marcus stood there deeply in debt, grinning like a fool and taking the credit. The dinner progressed in its usual agonizing fashion. Chloe dominated the conversation, steering every topic back to her new jewelry, her country club committee, and the various European vacations they were supposedly planning. I remained perfectly composed, contributing just enough to the conversation to avoid appearing sullen, while internally calculating the exact moment I would watch this entire charade burn to ash. As the waiter cleared our main courses to prepare for dessert, Chloe let out a sudden irritated sigh. She reached up and unclasped the heavy diamond necklace. "The clasp is catching terribly on the baby hairs at the nape of my neck," she complained, rubbing the skin. "It is giving me an absolute rash. I am just going to take it off for the rest of the dinner." Arthur chuckled. "A very expensive problem to have, my dear. Put it safely in your purse." "My clutch is far too small," Chloe replied, holding up a tiny crystal-embellished evening bag. "Maya, be a dear and pass me my coat. I will just slip it into the interior zippered pocket." Our coats had been taken by the hostess upon arrival, but the private dining room had its own freestanding coat rack positioned directly behind my chair. My tailored black cashmere overcoat was hanging right next to Malik's identical black cashmere overcoat. Chloe's camel-colored trench coat hung on the opposite side. I did not move a muscle. I simply turned my head and looked at her. "You have legs, Chloe. You can get it yourself." Eleanor let out a sharp, disapproving breath. "Maya, there is absolutely no need to be hostile. She simply asked for a favor." Malik placed a firm hand on my thigh under the table, squeezing hard enough to leave a bruise. "Maya, please," he warned quietly. I held my ground, offering Eleanor a cool, serene smile. "I am simply enjoying my water, Eleanor. I am not the coat check girl." Chloe let out a long, exaggerated sigh of martyrdom. She stood up, brushing past my chair, and walked over to the coat rack. I watched her reflection in the dark glass of the restaurant window. I saw her slip the heavy diamond necklace into a pocket, pat it down, and return to her seat with a smug, satisfied expression. Dessert arrived, a decadent array of chocolate soufflés and raspberry tarts. The conversation shifted to Arthur's upcoming golf tournament. I checked my watch. We had been at the table for nearly 2 hours, and my patience for this theatrical performance was rapidly expiring. Suddenly, Chloe stood up again, pushing her chair back with a loud, disruptive scrape against the hardwood floor. She walked over to the coat rack to retrieve her phone from her trench coat. The entire table watched as she patted down her pockets. Her movements, initially casual, suddenly became frantic. She began pulling the fabric inside out, her face draining of color. Marcus stood up, tossing his napkin onto the table. "Chloe, what is wrong?" "It is gone," Chloe whispered, her voice rising into a sharp, hysterical pitch. "The necklace. It is not in my pocket. It is completely gone." The private dining room erupted into chaos. Arthur immediately signaled for the restaurant manager while Eleanor rushed over to help Chloe frantically search the floor around the coat rack. Malik stood up, his face a mask of deep concern, helping Marcus pull the coats off the rack to shake them out. I remained seated, finishing the last bite of my raspberry tart, watching the panic unfold with absolute clinical detachment. "It has to be here," Marcus insisted, his voice tight with genuine panic. A man drowning in debt could not afford to lose a $150,000 asset, even if he did not actually pay for it. Nobody else has been in this room except the waiters. Chloe suddenly stopped searching. She slowly turned around, her eyes locking directly onto me. The manufactured panic on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating malice. She had found her angle. "Nobody else has been in this room," Chloe echoed loudly, pointing a trembling finger right at my face. "But Maya has been sitting directly in front of those coats all night." The entire room fell dead silent. Even the restaurant manager who had just rushed through the doors froze in his tracks. Chloe, what are you saying? Arthur demanded, his heavy brows drawing together in shock. I am saying that Maya has been glaring at my necklace with pure, unadulterated envy since the second I walked into this restaurant, Chloe spat, stepping toward me. She refused to hand me my coat earlier because she was already plotting. She sat there waiting for us to get distracted by dessert, and she reached back and took it. I slowly wiped my mouth with my linen napkin and placed it neatly next to my plate. That is quite an accusation, Chloe. It is the truth, she shrieked, playing the hysterical victim flawlessly. She has always been jealous of me. She resents everything Marcus and I have. You can take the girl out of the South Atlanta slums, but you clearly cannot take the slum culture out of the girl. Old habits die hard, do they not, Maya? If you see something you cannot afford, you just steal it. Eleanor gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, staring at me as if I had just morphed into a violent criminal right in front of her salad plate. Arthur shook his head in profound, utter disgust. I looked at my husband. I waited for Malik to shut this down. I waited for him to tell his mistress that accusing his wife of grand larceny was a step too far. Malik walked over to my chair and looked down at me with an expression of deep, tragic disappointment. Maya, he said, his voice dripping with condescending sorrow. If you took it just to teach her a lesson about flaunting wealth, or because you were feeling insecure, just give it back right now. We will handle this quietly. We will not press charges. Just return the necklace, baby, and we can get you the psychiatric help you clearly need. He was handing me the rope and demanding I hang myself. He wanted me to take the fall to look like a jealous, thieving, unstable woman, completely destroying my credibility with his parents while protecting Chloe. I stood up, slowly pushing my chair back. I smoothed the front of my emerald gown and looked directly at the restaurant manager. Sir, I would like you to call the police immediately. We have an accusation of grand larceny, and I want a full documented search conducted by law enforcement. Chloe's face paled slightly, but she stood her ground. You do not need the police to search your bag, Maya. Turn your purse over right now. I picked up my small black leather clutch and unzipped it. I turned it upside down and shook it out over the center of the dining table. A tube of lipstick, a compact mirror, my car keys, and my credit card clattered against the wood. No diamonds. Check her coat, Marcus demanded, aggressively stepping forward. I gestured gracefully toward the coat rack. Be my guest, Marcus. My coat is the black cashmere one on the left. The restaurant manager stepped in, eager to de-escalate the situation before the police arrived. Allow me, sir, he said politely. He picked up my black overcoat and methodically checked the left and right pockets, turning them inside out. He checked the interior lining. Nothing. He held it up, shaking his head. The coat is empty, ma'am. Chloe's eyes darted frantically around the room. She was visibly sweating now. The confident racist accuser was rapidly disintegrating into a panicked, cornered animal. It has to be there, she insisted, her voice shrill. I know she took it. Check the other coats. She probably hid it in someone else's pocket to throw us off. The manager sighed, picking up the camel trench coat. Empty. He then reached for the final coat on the rack. It was the other black cashmere overcoat, identical to mine in almost every way, except for the broader shoulders and the custom silk lining. It was Malik's coat. The manager slipped his hand into the deep right side pocket. He froze. The entire room stopped breathing. Slowly, the manager pulled his hand out. Dangling from his fingers, catching the low light of the chandeliers and practically blinding everyone in the room, was the vintage Cartier diamond necklace. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening, and completely beautiful. Arthur stared at the necklace, his mouth